Howdy, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Lei, the CVA, the Community Volunteer Ambassador for the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area. I'm going to share my screen and do our general consent statement. So as a visible disclosure, we'd like to inform any participants that any and all Zoom series is and will be recorded. The purpose of this is to provide the Zoom series to those who participated or missed out on the session. It is also provided the information for participants to refer back to. In addition to the visible disclosure, this statement will be orally stated at the beginning of each Zoom series like I am right now, and I'm going to stop sharing and hand it off to Riza to introduce our speaker today.
I actually remembered to unmute before I spoke. Hi, everybody. Just before we begin today's presentation, just want to remind all of our volunteers at Santa Monica Mountains to be sure to submit your volunteer hours. These Zoom sessions also count for your hours. They were due yesterday, but you have until the 5th. The sooner we get them, the sooner Lei and I can move forward with our end of year fiscal report. Aside from that, thank you all for your work here, even though the pandemic has put us in a little, side spot. But today we have a really great presentation. Antonio Sanchez has only been here a little over a year, and he's done some big things at our nursery. So Antonio, we're really excited to have you here. Tori and I will monitor the chat bar. If any of you have any questions, we'll make sure we revisit those for Antonio. And yeah, go for it, Antonio.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. How you guys doing? Please don't reply to that. Just say hi. Zoom's a little bit different, huh, than in-person talks. I'm super excited to be here. I give a lot of talks, a lot of lectures. I usually don't get nervous at all. I'm actually kind of nervous for this because I feel like, I usually give talks to board members and to members of the public, customers or landscape designers or whatever. But this one, I feel like this is to not just coworkers, but to volunteers. And you guys are super important to the work that we do. So I just want to make sure that I'm using your guys' time respectfully, wisely, and that you guys get something out of this. So I'm very happy to have you guys here. Lei said I have about 3 hours to speak, so I'm going to take the full 3 hours. Is that true? No, 45 minutes, my bad. So I'm going to go ahead and start this slideshow. Anybody who's worked with me for more than a day knows that I'm horrible at computers. So if there's anything wrong with this slideshow, it's my fault. And yeah, I'm not that good at them. So here's my first slide, to the nursery and beyond. I thought that I would try to make it eye-catching and popping. How Pixar and Toy Story have inspired a native plant nursery to read. That's so dumb. So when I do a lot of these talks, I'll be in 2 a.m, maybe either had a beer or a coffee. And I'm like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. And I can tell right now that that was a bad idea. So let's go past that. So what am I going to put you guys to sleep with over the next 45 minutes? How do I get this? There we go. So I'm going to go over some of the new and then some of the older programs that we've added onto at the nursery. I'm going to be talking about the native plant nursery at Rancho Sierra Vista or Sawiwa in Newberry Park. So I'm going to be covering a little bit of the seed program. We have a new program that offers free plants to the public. And we have a new program that's focusing on milkweed around the parks. And then I'm going to go over some opportunities while I'm talking about these new programs for you all, if you're volunteers, to help contribute to our mission at the nursery and in general the parks. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to just chat them up. And Lei, Raza, and Tori, I believe, will be checking that out. If they're good questions, we'll answer them. If they're bad questions, we'll just delete them. I'm just kidding. We're not going to delete them. And if you guys have any questions at all, I will post my email afterwards, but feel free to ask me questions, or if we want to get into deeper subjects about plants of the park, restoration, all sorts of stuff, feel free to email me and we can discuss that over email. And so what is new and what is renewed? I thought that was pretty cool. I'm like, oh, that was a 2:30 a.m. one, new and renewed. That sounds good. And now that I'm reading it, it's not that good. So what's new and renewed at the native plant nursery? The bad thing about these Zoom meetings is that I don't know if anybody's laughing. Usually in person, no one laughs and I just keep going forward. And I'm assuming no one's laughing here, so I'm just gonna keep going forward, but I'm laughing because I thought that these were funny. All right, so I'm gonna go over all this stuff. So I'm gonna talk about our nursery and restoration training program that we have at the nursery. Talk about the improved or added onto seed collections that we're making at the nursery. A newer program that we just started are some of the herbarium collections we've been making at the nursery. We have a program where we're going to be offering plants to the public. A lot of programs. Milkweed program, our oak sap program, which we work really hard to make that SAAP mean something. So once I get to that slide, you'll be pretty impressed that, wow, that makes sense. Oak sap program. We're going to go over a little bit of our seed germination data that we're collecting and how you all could contribute to that. Some of the interns and folks at the nursery are producing some videos now, so I wanted to show you guys some of those or talk about some of those. We're looking to start a new program in the next month, maybe 2 months, on training some native plant horticulturists and nursery folks at the nursery. I want to talk to you about a new partnership we have with state parks. And last but definitely not least is the diversity at the nursery and with our internships and how to get folks from different backgrounds into the national parks. So let's start off with what I think most people know the nursery as. If you all have ever been to the nursery or worked with Joey Algiers, maybe John Tisler, either volunteering at the nursery or seeing us work out in the parks doing restoration plantings or waterings, that's kind of what a lot of folks know of as the nursery and the restoration programs. And just to give you guys heads up, along with myself, who I got hired last August full-time, so I've been here about 13, 14 months. It's myself and a young woman named Mari, who is a full-time employee, but we'll be losing her in December. Her contract is up then. We have 4 part-time employees who work between 1 to 3 days a week through the Samuel Youth Program, and they will all be leaving, unfortunately, in November and December as well. I don't even want to know what's going to happen in January. I'm losing everybody in December. We have over 15 interns over this fiscal year. We've had 15 interns that we've been able to work with from various places in Southern California. On a irregular basis, we work with various groups around Southern California, like CNC, which is the Community Nature Connection, NET, which is Northeast Trees, SCA, which is the Student Conservation Alliance, state parks, etc. So we have a lot of folks flowing through the nursery on a weekly basis, which is really cool. It's been a little bit of a challenge through COVID to try to keep everybody separate, but if you guys seen some of our parks, some of our restoration sites, it's really easy to space people out when we get out there. And then we work with various volunteer groups, church groups, different groups from Malibu and other locations, and just individual volunteers, some of them who have been with the nursery for 3, 5, and sometimes longer years. So we have a lot of great folks coming through the nursery that help further our goals. And there's a picture of some of the first folks that I worked with in native plants over 15 years ago. Those are good people. I learned a lot from them. So I envision the nursery now, the last month or two, I've started looking at the nursery as almost like a training ground. And our botanist, Mark Mendelson, I might be paraphrasing, but in an email, he said we're developing like a world-class training program here at the nursery. And while maybe we're not quite there yet, I think we should hold the bar really high. And if we don't make it, we at least tried. And we got really close. And so my goal is to try to train interns and these part-time staff in these 5 areas when they come to the nursery, right? So the goal is to have all full-time interns and staff trained in most or all these following skills. Nursery growing, which is, I think, the basics, right? How to prepare soil, how to transplant plants, how to sow seed, how to water plants, how to fertilize, things like that. And then we get into seed collecting, which seed collecting sounds very, very simple. And it can be if all you want to do is take Salvia apiana or white sage and steal illegally some seed from our national park land and grow it at your house. It would be very easy to just break off some seed heads and then grow that at your house. I will get into our seed program and why it's much more complicated than that. But we're trying to, or we are training our interns and our staff to do this at a much deeper, more kind of scientific level. And then we're training these folks on herbarium skills, which includes plant ID and labeling and learning how to describe a plant. We're training them on restoration skills, which is outplanting, how to properly plant a plant in the ground, how to water, how to weed, how to mulch, how to care for a plant once it's been planted in the ground. And then last but not least is the computer work and the mapping work that goes with identifying where a population or a plant grows in the mountains, being able to GPS that, locate it, and then throw it onto a map so we can find it and go collect the seed, or we can identify where there's populations of stuff that we want to maybe replant or make the populations larger. So if that's all we did, I think we'd be very, very happy as a program. But if you guys know me, I'm not really ever happy with just that, right? If I had a restaurant, I'd be like, that's a good hamburger, but let me throw on some extra stuff. And it actually might be a ridiculous hamburger. There might be like 6 layers of meat on there. And I've been pretty vegetarian, so I don't know why I'm saying meat, but let's see. So the first thing that I'd like to offer as folks to be able to help in the nursery is just straight up regular routine nursery work. And it is fairly boring for some folks. It's what I do for a living. I've been doing it for the last 15 years. There's a picture of a nursery I used to have in Ventura County with my cousin and a good friend called Nopalito Nursery. So nursery work can be boring for some folks, but it's the most important thing that we do at the nursery. So growing plants, right now we're currently growing over 25,000 plants to outplant, which sounds like a lot, but we're doing them in smaller containers now, and it makes it very easy to plant in the ground. Our goal is to make everything as easy as possible. So we want to be able to carry these plants efficiently into the parks. When we plant them, we want to be able to dig the hole as small as we need to without compromising the longevity or the survivorship of that plant, etc. We're growing over 2,000 plants right now, apart from those 25,000, to donate to the public, and I'll get into what that program is. And the nursery, for me, the nursery work has been a really good spot to just build teams, right? To have the interns or the staff or volunteers come together on a weekly basis every other week and just see each other, talk, and do work, whether it's 20 people, 5 people, 10 people. And so we would love to have anyone who is interested in working with us, whether it's once a month, once a year, once a week. If you're interested in learning how to sow seed or how to transplant, or do you just want to come in and just help with whatever we need help, we'd love to have you. So there's my email again. And then the second thing that I think where maybe most people think of when they think of the nursery in our parks is the planting, right? The restoration. And this is not a picture of what we do, because first of all, my interns would not be that happy. They're fairly miserable when they're out planting. I'm just kidding. They're pretty happy, I think. That's definitely not a native plant. But our aim for this year is to plant over, again, I don't know if you guys are laughing. I'm just going to assume that quiet is just no one's laughing. So there's over 15,000 plants that our goal is to plant over 15,000 plants in different locations this rainy season. The rainy season for us is a very, that's kind of a loose term, right? But our rainy season is November to March. That's when it is the coolest. That's when we can expect a little bit of rain. And that's when the days are the shortest. And so the sun doesn't impact these small plants as much. We have a much better chance of getting these plants established in the ground. And so we've identified Paramount, Chesbro, Yerba Mansa, Potrero Creek as the 4 sites that we're going to focus on this year. We're also trying to get Zuma Creek or Zuma Canyon. You can tell I don't know what I'm that area very well. I'm going to say it's Zuma Creek Canyon. I'm just giving it a new name. That is a 5th location that we may visit if we have time, but these first 4 are the most important for this year. And it's almost, I see the restoration events and the plantings very similar to the nursery work in that we can do it. We're going to be doing it weekly starting in November. And it's a great spot to build teams, to build camaraderie. And it's a great spot if you only have once a month to come out, that we would love to have you come out. And so we're going to be posting, hopefully in the next day, in the next 24 hours, on Eventbrite, some opportunities starting in November for you all to join us in these outplantings. And my boss, Joey Algiers, will be sending out emails to that large volunteer list that will announce these volunteer events. We're not going to be having huge 100 folks events, 50 people events, but what we're going to be doing is breaking down these restoration plantings into smaller groups between like 8:30 and 10, right? So you can come and hit it hard for about 90 minutes and then you can leave. And then the next group will come in at 11 to 1. Maybe the next group will come in 2 to 4, whatever, however we work it out. So we want to socially distance everybody, and it'll be a little bit more work for us, but I think if we organize it well, then we'll still be able to get a lot of folks to these events and accomplish our mission of planting, thousands of plants in the ground. And so let's get into a little bit of the more detailed stuff, the newer stuff that we're doing at the nursery. So we've begun collecting seed. Seed has been collected by Randy, Joey, and other folks way before me at the nursery, and we still have a lot of that seed. But one of the old jobs I used to have was running the nursery at Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden, which is now California Botanic Garden. And so I like to take a lot of what I learned from the California Botanic Garden and apply it here to the parks. And so what we're doing is we've raised the bar for our collections. And when we collect seed, we're making sure that they are conservation quality collections. And what I mean by quality, I'll get into the details, but sorry, to compare ourselves to Rancho. Rancho is the largest seed bank of native plants, of California native plants in the world. And it sounds amazing. It's actually one small room. That's a picture of their freezers. That's a lot of their rarer plants, but they're all, beautifully accessioned. They have kind of their social security numbers on them. So they have over 5,000 accessions, which is just a collection. They have, at this point, almost 2,000 species in that seed bank. And so I want to aim high for the SAMO seed bank as well. So I think that we should have, when I'm done, which could be as soon as a year or 5 or 10 years, whenever, I want this to keep going. And I would like for the SAMO nursery to have over 1,000 collections. And another goal is to have over 1,000 species collected. And so we may collect the same species, let's say white sage or Salvia apiana. We may collect that from Chesbro, and then we'll go to Paramount and collect it at Paramount. And then we'll go to Zuma, what did I call it? Zuma Creek Canyon, which is a new park. Go look for it on the maps. And we'll collect Salvia apiana there. We'll clean them separately and we'll store them separately, with the idea being that even though they're the same plant, that the genetics and a lot of stuff that we can't even see inside the seed is way different, right? It's just like people in neighborhoods, right? I grew up in Oxnard and El Paso. And so my background may be a lot different from my cousin who grew up in Camarillo or Ventura, right? And so we want to keep those separate. Not that me and my cousin don't want to get, this is going to get confusing. Anyways, me and my cousin see each other, even though he's from Camarillo. You guys get what I'm talking about. When we want to go restore, we would ideally like to put Chesbro white sage in Chesbro. We would rather not put Zuma white sage in Chesbro. Man, there's a lot of cousin stuff that I could get into right there. Anyways, and I can hear you not laughing, so I'm going to keep going. Is it really that hard to make conservation quality seed collections? And the answer is yes. It takes a tremendous amount of time. Just to be clear, we're not going to one white sage and picking off some seed and then using that as our collection. For a conservation quality collection, we'd have to follow all these steps. There's a lot more steps, but so I don't take 3 hours for this, I want to go over just a few of the steps. We have to go out and identify these areas that have large populations. For us, a large population of, let's say, white sage has hundreds of individuals. Ideally, it has thousands of individuals. And I'd like to give thanks to Mark and Joey, who helped us identify a lot of these spots when I first started. They gave us a lot of help, so we didn't have to actually go find all these spots. They had already identified some of the spots for us. And so that was a big help. So we went out there, we identified that they were big enough, healthy enough. Then we take a piece of the plant, right? And we press it and we label it, which I'll get into details because it's the whole other program, just to make sure that that's the plant. We want to identify if someone ever comes back and has a question as to whether that really was the plant, we want them to be able to identify that plant. And so we take an herbarium sample that someone can look at 50 years or 100 years later and identify that as white sage. Then we go back when the seed is ready, which is really hard to do. Sometimes you go 2 weeks too early and the seed's not ready, you got to go back. So we try to time it correctly. And we want to collect seed from at least 50 plants. The more the better. 50 is the minimum. And we need to collect at least 30,000 seed. So 30,000 seed from oak trees, even though acorns we can't store. Acorns, once they dry, they don't germinate anymore. So maybe acorn's not a good example, but everyone can imagine how big an acorn is, and how to collect 30,000 acorns would take a lot of time. So it can take a lot of time for some of these collections, or for like something like a monkey flower, really in just a handful of pods, you can have 30,000 seed, because every monkey flower pod has 100 or 200 seeds. So you can do it really quickly. So it just depends. A lot of species have a very small window of about 2 to 6 weeks for the seed to be perfect, for it to be ripe, but for it not to blow away. And then we have to clean the seed down until we have over 99% just seed, right? We don't want any of the shell. We don't want any of the chaff, any of the flower parts. We want to get just mostly seed. once with that, at that point, we haven't done this with any of our collections yet. Right now, they're just in the paper bag phase, just drying. But we want to dry them down to a specific humidity, about 10 to 15% humidity. And then once we're at that point, we're going to break them up into 2 equal parts. And then we're going to do a germination test to see how well that seed germinates, right? Because when we put it in the freezer, we want to know, okay, if we have 1,000,000 seed and we pull 100, how many plants are actually going to wake up, right? And so if we have 50 wake up out of 100, that's 50% germination. And so we want to be able to pull these seed 10 years later, 20 years later, and test the seed to make sure it's still good. A lot of times after 20 or 30 years, the seed will still be very, very good, and we'll still have 50% germination or 45%. Once we get down to like 10% germination, 20% germination in 10 or 20 years, we would ask those seed collectors to go back and recollect that lot, right? To make sure that these lots are being kept healthy. And then we'll vacuum seal them and send them into freezers into 2 separate parts of the park. That way, if there's ever a fire, there's not a very good chance that a fire would hit the 2 seed spots at the exact same time. And so unfortunately, we would probably sacrifice one of our seed lots, but we wouldn't lose the whole collection, right? And then we'll always set a small amount aside for us to actually grow for the next 2 or 3 years to outplant. And then we are working with folks like Seed LA, which is a nonprofit, a group of nonprofits from the LA and somewhat Ventura County area that is trying to do urban restoration like the LA River. They're looking for a local genetic seed, and we're helping to contribute some seed to them. And so how can volunteers help us with this program? Unfortunately, with COVID, it's really hard to put people in the same vehicle and to drive out to these sites to collect. But we do have opportunities to help us clean the seed. Once we've collected the seed, it's very, very slow work to clean the seed. So it can take hours or days to collect a collection of millions of seed, and we are always looking for help. So if you guys like to look at microscopic stuff and you like to listen to music on your headphones for 4 hours, this would be perfect for you. So we do have dozens and dozens of collections that we need to clean right now, and we would appreciate any help. And so on to the herbarium collection. So the herbarium collection, right, is the second part of the seed collection. We need to cut some of the plant to positively identify this. And I apologize for how bad this slide is. This is from my friends at the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. It's a really cool 3 different slides of Nemophila. I think it's Menziesii. I think it's baby blue eyes. And up close, if you could see a high quality of this, again, sorry, the blue on all 3 of these pressings shows up even over 100 years later. And so we're able to see some of the colors, the leaf structures. Scientists are able to pull DNA off of some of these. And so there's a lot of scientific information on these plant pressings. And so this is our goal, and we've started it, and we've already done dozens of them. Our goal is to start, and they've already been doing this at the parks, right? They have hundreds, if not thousands of them they've produced over the last few decades. But our goal is to keep contributing to these herbarium collections that we have here at the parks, and then to be able to tie them to the seed collection. So if anyone ever has a question about what seed this is, they'll be able to say, okay, this is 1146. Let's go look at the number 1146 or whatever number it has in the herbarium, and they can compare and they can confirm that those are the same plants. And I love the herbarium collections because it helps teach a little bit of plant ID and all these kind of observation skills to interns and to staff, right? Whenever we take these herbarium samples, we want to observe what are the partner plants around it, whether it's weeds or oaks or milkweeds. We learn to see what kind of slope it's on, what kind of soil it's at, the aspect, is it facing the sun, is it facing north? And I just like to imagine if we had an herbarium collection of, let's say, white sage from Paramount that someone took in the year 1389. And so what we do is open up a folder from 1389, and if it's maintained correctly, it should look pretty good. And ideally on the label, which you guys can see on the bottom right corner, it's hard to read the details, but in the bottom right corner has a label, and it has all of the who collected it, where they collected it, and then it has all these species. And a lot of the restoration plantings that we do, we're going to these sites and we don't know what we're planting into, right? We don't know what was around because all we see is mustard and all these invasive grasses. Imagine if we were able to open up all these folders from the parks from 600 or 700 years ago and get an idea of what was here at Yerba Mansa Meadow, right? What was at Satwiwa Cultural Center? What was at Paramount Ranch? What was at Chesborough besides invasive grasses and just a few oaks? So I think it's really important scientifically to document what's going on with herbarium samples. I could talk a lot longer for herbarium samples, about herbarium samples, but I think it's something really cool that we're doing. And there's a friend of mine, Matt Williams, who runs the herbarium at the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. Herbariums are beautiful places for volunteers to work, because what we do is we collect the samples, and then it takes a decent amount of time to carefully paste the sample onto paper, to make a label, etc. So, we are looking for volunteers to help us with the mounting of these herbarium samples. And so if you all are interested in helping us out, please contact me, and we'd like to move some of those projects forward. Another program that we started is Pretty Plants for the Public program. I tried to figure out a program that I could fit as many P's as possible into. And so this one fits the bill. I don't, again, no laughter. And the goal of this program is to identify over 50 pretty plants, right? And pretty is a very rough word, but pretty plants that people like in their landscapes, that are easy to use in local gardens or church gardens or school gardens or whatnot. And so I've picked over 50 plants from our local species that occur in the Santa Monica Mountains. We've started collecting them, or in some cases, we just pulled some of the seed that we had and we started growing them. And we've been growing them with the interns and the staff. In the future, I see the horticulturist training program that we're going to start as moving this project forward. And so at this point, we have over 1,000 plants that are near ready to give out to the public. And so another goal of this plant is to promote the use of local, genetically local plants to the public. These are things like toyon, elderberry, white sage, penstemon. There's a few funky plants in there that people like Coreopsis gigantea, or monkey flowers that are cool, but they usually die in 2 or 3 years. And so we also want to encourage people to plant during the rainy season, so November to April. And so if you're interested in helping out with this, we'd love for you to help us spread the word. If you know someone who's been wanting to do natives and either doesn't have the money, or for whatever reason hasn't been able to do it, this would be a great program to let them know about. And another idea that I have that has not been cleared yet, but I think it's always cool to have ideas, right? And then, we can shoot them down whenever we need to, is imagine the visitors parking lot, the main visitors parking lot at RSV in Newbury Park. It's packed in the springtime by like 9 a.m. You can't find parking there. There's dozens, if not hundreds of people going through there every Saturday. So imagine a farmer's market style booth at the parking lot where we are promoting the use of native plants, right? An intern, a volunteer, or a staff member has a beautiful setup with a tent. And we're not necessarily handing out plants, because I don't like the idea of just giving people plants if they didn't come to the park to get a plant. But we're showing them that this is what they could have, right? And then we want to go through a process, kind of like a small screening process, to make sure they'll be able to take care of the plant. Like if they're visiting from Colorado, we don't want to take home a plant, but I think a short screening process, and they could either show up the next Saturday and pick them up. I think those details we could work out, but I think it would be a really good way of promoting to the public what we're doing to get more interest in our nursery and just to get people excited about plants, right? And so when that project is ready, we would love to have folks who are talkers. Any car salespeople that are watching right now, we would love to have you. Again, no laughter, so I'll keep going. The Milkweed Map program, this is one that I think is really, really cool. We're right in the middle of it. We're actually doing this today. And the goal of this project is to go around to the parks and identify a few different populations of milkweed. And milkweed is a cool little perennial. A perennial is a plant that lives more 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And you guys probably know, but milkweed is really the only source for monarch butterflies to lay their little caterpillars on, and for the baby caterpillars to eat, right? We have 3 species of milkweed in the park. There's one that's dominant that you find more than the other 2 species. And that's Asclepias fascicularis, or what we know as, I know it so well, I forgot the common name. Let's just call it milkweed. I think, narrow-leaf milkweed, there we go. And so we've gone around, we actually asked Mark, our botanist, and Taria, who's a botanist who's now retired, if they knew of any large populations, and both of them thought about it, and the answer they gave us was they really couldn't come up with populations larger than 50 to 100. And it makes sense, because milkweed is not one of those plants that just is everywhere. It just kind of occurs in little patches, right? And so we set out with our GPSs and with our interns and our folks, and we just scouted RSV, so Rancho Sierra Vista, Chesbro, Paramount, and Rocky Oaks. And what we found is what Mark and Tarja said. We did find 50s and hundreds and sometimes thousands of plants, but never in these huge occurrences, right? There was only 2 next to each other or 5 next to each other. But what we have been documenting is the larger occurrences, right? The 5, 10, the 15, the 30 plants. And what we're seeing is that those plants are occurring in areas that are a little bit flatter. There's a little bit more shade. There's a little bit more water. If you can imagine, when it rains, the water is going to hang out there just a day or 2 extra than it would in somewhat rockier or more sloped areas. And so we've collected at this point over 100,000 seed of our local milkweeds. And thanks to one of our volunteers, Michelle, at the nursery, she gave us this idea to put these type of mesh bags. Do not plant this milkweed in the back, by the way. This is a bad picture. You can tell I'm just bad with technology because I could not pull a picture from my camera to do. Anyways, let's not talk about that. So she gave us this idea: as milkweed is ripe, it almost explodes, and it has these hairs, they call them floss, that make the seed fly. And it makes it really hard to collect if you're not there within a day or 2 of it being ready. So if you guys have noticed all this, what it looks like trash, these mesh bags all over the parks, what we're doing is collecting the seed. And so we were at Rocky Oaks this morning collecting some of the seed. Like I said, we've collected over 100,000 seed. We've germinated a few thousand plants now. And we're trying to plant over 5,000 milkweed into these areas. We want to find these nice, happy populations and expand them even more, with the hopes of them expanding on their own and then butterflies starting to visit them even more. And so how can you help as a volunteer? The first thing you do is, in your garden, if you do have a garden, is please only plant the local milkweed. We're finding that's much better for our local caterpillars and butterflies. And the second thing is, if you would like to grow milkweed, it's one of our plants that we're giving away in our program, or we can give you seed if you want to try it on your own. So please contact us for that. Another cool program that we're doing is a oak sapling. This is cool. We worked hard to come up with these SAAP, Sapling Assessment and Assistant Program. And all this is we've gone to 2 sites, Chesbro and Potrero, and we've identified some of the oak saplings, basically the young trees that are looking really, really good after the fire. And the fire did some bad stuff, but it also did some good stuff for our plants. It cleared out a lot of the weeds. And what young oak trees have a hard time fighting off is all these mustards and all these invasive grasses that are basically little straws in these grasslands, and they're just sipping water and nutrients. When the fire burns it off, it actually clears that out, and it lets some of these saplings come back with force. And so we've identified hundreds of saplings at Chesbro. We've measured some of them. We've measured the more mature oaks, the 50, 100, 200 years oaks. And we found that the average span between healthy, old 50 to 100 or older oak trees is about 31 feet, right? We've done dozens and dozens of measurements. And so we found so let's just round it down to 30. So on average, there's about 20 to 40 feet between mature oak. We're calling it 30, right? But we found it's about 20 to 40 feet. And so the purpose of this project is to identify saplings that are 20 to 40 feet apart from older trees. And then we're going to mark those trees. We're going to mow or cut or weed whack around them. And then we're going to mulch and water them. We're going to focus on actually babying or assisting these plants into their teenage years. And the idea is, if we can do that for 1 or 2 years and have volunteers or community groups adopt these oaks, that we can push them into teenage years. And if another drought hits or if another fire hits, we want to be able to compare to see if the ones that we've helped have a better chance of surviving or do survive better than all these saplings that are coming out that have not been cared for, right? And so we'll announce that through Joey and through Eventbrite when we're ready to take people. But once a month, we're going to be asking folks to go water these, to mulch, and to weed around them to help push these guys forward. I got a few more projects to talk about, almost done. This one is going to start, I'm hoping to start in the next 4 to 8 weeks. And this, I'm only looking for 5 to 10 people to participate in this. I've already identified 2 people who would like to participate. This is a nursery and horticulturist training program for native plants. I've been working with native plants for over 15 years. I know some, I still have a ton to learn, but at this point, I think I'm ready to help train some folks who want to get into this industry. I did the same thing at Santa Barbara Botanic Garden for a little bit over a year. I went through a very similar program. And so we're looking at a 10 to 15 week program on Fridays that's going to teach people for about 2 to 4 hours the basics of seed, sowing, of cuttings, of plant selection, how to not run a business, but how to plan out production. If you need to have a white sage, 1,000 white sage ready by April, where do you start, right? How many seed do you need? When do you sow, et cetera, what fertilizer to use? And then some basics on landscape irrigation, design, and installation. And my hope is that we can get this off the ground, that we can go in once we have folks trained, and we can start helping with the public gardens at King Gillette Ranch, at Saukwewa, and maybe even at church groups or schools. And we can help install some of these plants, make these gardens look amazing, right? Because sometimes what happens is these gardens get installed, but there's no long-term maintenance. And my goal is to have long-term commitment and long-term maintenance of these gardens to make native plants look good, to make people want to plant native plants, et cetera, et cetera. You guys get the idea. Another new project that we just started is a partnership with state parks. They have a project going in next November, so a little bit over a year. They're going to be planting all native plants in this beautiful new public restoration that they have at Trippett Ranch. And so they've asked us to help them collect the seed. And so they just started yesterday. We had 6 youngsters come by, and we'd show them how to collect herbarium samples, how to do seed collection of milkweed on our property. And starting next week, we're going to go on to state parks property and collect with them. And the benefit for us is that, of course, we get to build that bond that we already have, but just build even more of a bridge with state parks. But we do get to keep a lot of that seed, right? So we're hoping to collect millions of seed that is basically from the Santa Monica Mountains. And just because it's state parks and national parks, the plants don't see a border, right? So we'll be able to be collecting our local genetic seed, some of it, which we have a hard time finding on our land. So it's going to be a really good project. And I think it'll help build even better partnerships in the future with State Park. And we are doing a few more things. We're asking some of our interns right now to research how to grow some of these plants. I know how to grow a lot of these. Most of them aren't that hard to grow, but some actually need some seed, need fire. Some seed need acid treatment as if they're going through the stomach of a bird. There's all sorts of things that some of our seed might need. And so we're asking some of our interns to research that. And if you at home would like to help us research, it takes about maybe 45 minutes to an hour of internet research to find out how to grow, let's say, white sage. Even though we already know how to grow white sage, you would type it in, seed propagation, take all these notes that we can give you ideas of what notes we're looking for. And then we're putting that into a database that when the next nursery manager or the next seed person comes through, they already have a list of how to grow stuff, right? Because unfortunately, some of that stuff is really hard to find right now. Some of the interns and volunteers at the nursery have started producing these really cool videos on our milkweed project, on our herbarium project that I'm super excited about. So we're going to keep moving forward with those. I'm not sure that there's too much to help with if you're a volunteer, unless you're really good with videos and cameras and making movies. If you are, we would love help with that. But these youngsters, a lot of most of the interns that we work with are fairly young, in the 18 to like 25 age range, and they're amazing at producing videos. It's crazy. I can barely even transfer a picture from my phone. Anyways, look forward to more of those on YouTube and on different social media. I think that'd be really cool and a way to help train other people and attract attention to what we're doing. And the last thing, like I said, I think is maybe the most important, is we're trying to attract a different, a larger group of folks to the nursery and to the parks. And so right now we have a very healthy diversity of folks from all different backgrounds, from all different communities at the nursery. My boss, Joey Algiers, secured a grant for us to help fund some seed collectors from underrepresented backgrounds. So we have 3 young ladies right now working for us collecting seed, who are from these backgrounds in different parts of LA and Ventura County. And I'm just looking forward to taking the nursery and these projects to different communities and to different areas around Southern California. And so how can you help with that? Probably just giving us money. If you have like $1 million, that would be great. I'm just kidding. But I think I've gone a little bit over my time. I want to thank the nursery volunteers, the interns, and the staff that have helped help us reach the goals that we have in 13 or 14 months. and that will help us even more. And I would look forward to hearing through email or some of the questions you guys may have right now on how you might be able to help contribute. And with that, I will, I guess, be quiet. Thank you guys for listening.
So Antonio, I think if all of us weren't muted, it would have been very disruptive because there was much laughter alone in my room. My kids were like, "You're not really working. What are we lies?" All right. So thank you for the fun presentation.
I don't.
So a couple questions. One about herbarium samples.
Yeah.
Do you take for the same plant? Is it like every year we collect a certain amount, or every 10 years we collect a certain amount from a specific plant? Is there a rhythm?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the herbarium sample is really cool. That project, because like I said, Mark and Taria and other folks have been doing that for probably decades now. The reason we started doing them at the nursery, it's not really part of our job at the nursery, but we want to be able to scientifically tie it to our seed collection, right? I'll give you an example right now, like not right now, but a few months ago, I pulled a plant that I thought was Epilobium canum, which is a California fuchsia. We sowed it, and then Epilobium canum did not come up. It was not California fuchsia, it's something else. It would have been nice to be able to look at the herbarium to see what that seed collector thought it was, right? It was a daisy, and those actually can be confused very easily in the field. So the herbarium samples that we're doing right now, I had envisioned something bigger, but because of COVID, it's a little bit smaller. But I would love, this is a perfect project for like 3rd to 6th graders. When they come to, this is right up their alley as far as cutting plants, describing flowers, leaves, mounting, writing labels. It just helps you expand your mind and kind of your observational skills. Man, I'm really good at not answering questions. So the answer to the question is we're really only taking herbarium samples tied to seed collections, right? And so right now we've identified 50 to 100 species that we really, really want to collect as seed. So we're not just going to Rancho Sierra Vista and pulling an oak if that's not on our list to collect. John Tisler, Joey, and I had a meeting a few days ago, and John expressed interest in wanting to collect from 7 different zones in the park. I guess the park is kind of broken up into 7 different, I believe, either climate or kind of like maybe riparian and coastal beach or whatever zones. So that is something that could be really interesting. But right now, all we're collecting herbarium samples of is something that we want to collect seed of, right? So today we collected 5 herbarium samples at Rocky Oaks, and it's stuff that we want to go back and collect seed of. So one of them was Corythorogeny or Lysingia, which is an aster. And so we collected some of that. We collected a flower, and it's now drying. And that happens to be seeding right now too. So we'll be able to tie those together. Some other stuff isn't seeding right now, but at least we have the herbarium collection. We'll go back in a month or 2 and collect the seed. So does that answer the question? We shouldn't really be collecting from the same populations every year. It's not a good practice because we want that seed bank to develop in the parks, right? If there's ever a fire or whatever, we want our native plants to emerge, right? We want all that seed in the ground because a lot of our seed can last 10, 20, 30 years in the ground. They're just waiting for their time to germinate. So ideally, we'd only go to that area once, and then every 5, 10, 15 years, go back to that area.
Yeah.
And when we collect, we try to only, not try, we only collect 20% of the plant at maximum of the seed, right? With the idea being the other 80% stays with the plant.
Yes, I think you definitely answered it. Thank you. Okay, so there is somebody who found a little baby oak tree that's about 2 or 3 inches tall on their property. Should they move it? How? And yeah, is there a way to advise on a best location?
So yeah, oaks are amazing. If you have 2 or 3 inches of growth, you can have feet. That is multiple feet, right? Feet of root. There's a chance that that's 5 or 10 feet already in the ground as a taproot, right? So oaks have taproots. A lot of our plants don't have taproots. They have a lot of surface roots. Oaks do too, but oaks develop a very strong taproot. So the chances that you're going to kill that plant are really good. If you have to move that, We have oaks. We can give you an oak. But if you have to move that because if it got big in 30 years, it just, you can't park a car there no more or whatever, what you want to do, if you can wait till January, February, wait till January, February. The soil will be cooler. Hopefully we'll have some rain. That's a perfect time to move. If you can't, what I would do is wait 2 or 3 weeks to move. In those 2 or 3 weeks, once a week, water the plant deeply if it hasn't been getting water, right? So immediately today or tomorrow, go out and water it. Leave the hose on dripping for about an hour or two. Let the water soak. The next week, do the same thing. The third week, do the same thing. Somewhere in there, fertilize the plant too with liquid fertilizer. So you've had 2 or 3 weeks of water and some nutrients, right? The plant is as healthy as we can get it. And then if you're at that point and you have to move in the next 3 weeks, dig as deep a hole as you can and pull out as much of that taproot as possible, and then plant it into either a pot or into the ground that has been watered before, right? But ideally, we're gonna wait till the soil is cooler, till we've had rain and that plant's kind of been able to wake up. Even though most of our oaks don't go dormant, they do go through this drier phase. So if you can do that, wait till like January, February, that'd be the ideal time. If not, just ask us for a plant and we can give you one.
Cool. Same from Evelyn as well. How the question says, how do you know if the white sage is ready? Is that a clear enough question for you?
That's a great question. Yeah, hopefully we're going to make videos on all this. With a lot of seed, I hate to be so graphic, but I think it works. How do you know a baby is ready to come out? A baby just comes out of its mother when they're ready, right? When he or she is ready. That's the time, right? If everything goes correctly, and we're assuming everything goes correctly in the wild. So seed is ready when it just offers itself to you. And what I mean by that is you can, when it has fur like floss, like milkweed, or if it has hair like some of our like asters, it just flies off. You don't have to pull it. Imagine a tomato. If you have to pull a tomato, it's probably not ripe. It'll be okay, but the real good tomatoes are they just fall off, right? Or oranges, right? They're ready. They're ready. And so with white sage, you can shake and you can hear it because it'll loosen up and the seed is hard and you can actually hear, you can almost do a dance with the seed. Another way is you just put your hand out and you tap the seed out and it'll fall. If it doesn't fall, I mean, there might not be any seed. The birds love sage seed, but it usually falls, right? If you're there at a good time, it usually flowers in May or June. The seed's usually ready July or August. So if you're there around that time, you should be able to find some seed. If you go like in January, February, all the seed probably fallen out or the birds probably got to it. But at this time of year, you should be able to just shake. And a really good resource is the place I used to work at, which is RSABG, which is Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden. RSABG, they have a website that has a ton, hundreds of pictures of seed. And so you can see what the seed looks like. White sage is related to chia. And so if you've ever seen chia seed, it looks very, very similar. It's the same shape. That's the easiest way. Just shake and you should be able to hear it. It should fall, or it should just kind of be able to pull it off very, very easily from the plant.
Cool. About the fertilizer for the oak tree, when you're talking about that, is what's the formulation of fertilizer?
Yeah, so this is like emergency, right? This is like horticulture emergencies as far as transplanting, right? We usually don't use fertilizer or on native plants, but what you're asking is you're basically doing surgery or like, you know, we're doing something very, very serious, especially with a taprooted plant. So always a liquid fertilizer. And I hate, so liquid, it's like Advil, like a solid Advil takes a while to hit you. Liquid Advil is there pretty quick, right? So always a liquid fertilizer so it hits the plant faster. And you know, we don't need any poinsettia or crazy type fertilizers, but I don't want to promote brands, but like a Miracle Grow general fertilizer, there's probably like a 15, 15, 15, 15, 20, 20, something like that. Something in the low teens, low 20s. That's perfect. And just read what it says on there. You know, say apply every 7 days or whatnot. Just follow those directions. By no means am I saying fertilize your native plants. I'm saying if you need to move a plant during the dry season, water it and give it fertilizer to give it a little bit of boost.
Cool, thank you. Okay, and so one of the earlier slides, there were yellow and orange California poppies. Are those the same flower?
Yeah. Okay. That's what I get for stealing images from the internet. So there's a bunch of species of California poppies. It's really crazy. I think most people are familiar with Schultzia californica, which is California poppy. There's some really coastal ones. There's some desert stuff. They have, even if they're the same species, there's a lot of different, right? Let's just take my family, my Mexican family. A lot of us like, whoa, dude, how are you guys the same family? Like, even though we're the same species. So yes, I'm pretty sure that picture is the same species. It's just really cool color variations, right? We'd have to get in there and actually look at some of the plant parks to be able to tell the species. I'm pretty sure that's the same plant. You just find color variations in, especially in annuals a lot. It happens with baby blue eyes, happens with, even though California poppy is not an annual, with some of those plants that reproduce really quickly every year, they wake up and they're dead within a year. You'll see a lot of very slight, orange to yellow to slight white and all those.
Okay. Any plans to restore native plants that are disappearing or becoming rare? Mel, I don't know if you had specific ones in mind, or if Antonio, you feel like you can answer that without.
If she does have specific plants, that would be cool. There are a few. So the sad thing about rare plants. So let's explain the difference. There's a difference between rare plants that are rare because they're probably thousands of years ago, right? They were. Let's take there's a Dudleya in the park or an Eriogonum crocatum in the park that really only occurs on volcanic outcroppings. And there's not really a way to tell if 10,000 years ago there was more of that plant. But we can kind of tell that just where it lives, there's not a lot of volcanic outcroppings in the park. There's not a lot of volcanic outcroppings in Southern California. So there's a good chance that that plant just evolved and it found a really small spot to grow in. And it's rare. You can grow that plant in gardens, but the chances that it's going to be able to jump out and then expand into flat grasslands is bad. And we probably shouldn't expand it out into grasslands. So that's a rare plant that just has a rare habitat, right? Just a rare kind of like these kind of rare soils, alkaline soils or whatever. And then there's rare just because that we beat the heck out of these plants and they're just rare. And I think personally that milkweed is one of those. I think milkweed, where we're finding milkweed is in flat areas where water kind of hangs out and there's a little bit of oaks. And what does that sound like? That sounds like a perfect place to build a house. That sounds like a perfect place to build a Walmart. That sounds like a perfect place to put cows on. And so I think that milkweed was probably a lot more prolific, probably just a few hundred years ago, and that we've cleared it out by eating it from cows, by just planting over it. So in stuff that we know the plants will survive, we definitely want to try to replant. So the milkweed, we're showing signs that the soil and the water is there, the habitat's there. Let's fatten up those populations. So wherever we see those signs, that's what we're trying to do. I wouldn't call them rare plants because there are problems with genetics. If there's only 86 plants left, the genetic wise, like how do we start restoring those, right? You start having inbreeding and all sorts of things that honestly, I'm not an expert at. But there are a few very, very extremely rare plants in the parks that we do have small projects on, but I don't think we'll ever just have fields and fields and fields of those red Dudleyas.
Cool. All right, so there's tons of comments about, I want to help with this one, or I live near this way, Cheeseboro, and what's happening there that I can help. So one, is there a process if people want to volunteer for any of these? Is it emailing a certain person? One for that. And then the other one is about plants. If anyone was like, well, I want to put milkweed in my yard, is there a process for saying like, I want this plant, come to the nursery at this time, anything like that?
Yeah. So so please email me, and I would encourage you guys to email me right now. In fact, hang up on the Zoom call and just email me, because what happens a lot of times is we forget and we do other stuff. So please email me right now. I would love to see everybody disappear from Zoom and just email me, because I will get back to you. It might take me a few days, but let's organize something. Please email me, and I'll probably I think I'll be the one responding to all those. And as far as the plants go, email me on that too. And what I'll do is I'll respond. I go, cool, we're going to start giving the plants out in November, right? Because we want them to have the best chance for success. And then I have a list of folks that we're going to email in November that I'll send out, hey, we're ready to give out plants. This is the species that we have. And then I still got to figure out with Joey a way to distribute them like correctly and make sure that, you know, someone doesn't take 600 milkweed. There's stuff we have a ton of, and there's stuff we only have like 20 or 30 of. We just want to do it fairly. And then we can always try to get you stuff later on too, or next year. But yeah, either way, just email me. And I would be happy to answer all of those.
So Riza just wrote your email in the chat box. So if anyone wants to know it, open your chat, Antonio Sanchez at samofund.org. Awesome, Antonio.
We have one more question. Sorry.
All good.
Bonnie had one. Bonnie, do you mind going on audio? You had a very interesting question for Antonio that couldn't go through.
I'm on audio. So
okay, cool.
Every year, Canal Valley Audubon has a grant program where we give 24 homes $200 worth of plants at wholesale. It's usually about 41-gallon plants from El Nativo. And I just sent out the letters to the 5 people I'm working with last night. And Antonio, you've developed such great programs. I'm wondering if you have handouts or a website that these people can go to yet to learn about the care and maintenance and planting. And I know there's other resources, but you're local.
Yeah, that's a great question. First, let's go to the $200. How do I get in on some of that?
You missed it. Your yard probably is already converted. It's for people to convert.
No, I'm looking for just $200. I'm just kidding.
We buy the plants.
What was the question? I was busy planning my joke out that I didn't even listen to. I'm just kidding. What was the question?
I want to point people to the Park Service. Yes, for resource.
Yeah, I remember when I started, the director of Samo Fund, which is a real close partner I work for Samo Fund, Charlotte mentioned that she would love to have on the website resources for plants, right? And I can do all that. That's actually like my specialty, is showing people how to do that. And that's, but it's gonna take time, right? Developing that website is gonna take time. So I don't have any, we don't have anything. Maybe the National Parks does. The best people to go to right now is probably, was it Tree of Life Nursery down in San Juan Capistrano, has started to put together some really good videos on how to plant. And they have pretty good documents online. Some of the other ones I would rather not say, because I think they're missing some stuff. But I think Tree of Life Nursery is pretty good so far. And there's a book I love, if I can promote a book, by a friend of mine, Greg Rubin, who's down in San Diego. If you guys can only buy one book on native plant gardening, he has 2 books, and both of them are phenomenal. He has really, really good techniques and really good plants. And I would recommend his book.
What are the books, Antonio?
Greg Rubin. Oh, I think it's like California Native Landscaping or something. I know what the book looks like. I forget the name of it though.
Who's the author?
Greg Rubin. Greg Rubin, Rubin. Yeah. And I see that, someone says CMPS, Calscape. I would rather not say.
Right. I already have those. I did not include Tree of Life. So you're right. They're wonderful. I will add them. And maybe next year we'll be able to add the nursery.
Yeah. My hope is to do videos and stuff like that. We would like to produce things like that. I think that's the goal.
Awesome.
So that was a ton of opportunities, Antonio. That's awesome. And in so many ways, and some of them were sitting at home too on a computer, research stuff, and maybe even website page development.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So Antonio Sanchez at samofund.org. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate your time. Thanks for all you do for the parks.
Thanks, Antonio.
I have one last question. If I
can yeah. Go ahead, Mel.
I was going to ask Antonio. So, are there any plans, or is this just too labor intensive to go out to areas where, like the non-native flowers that have flown in from, some neighbor's yard, Are there any plans to like try to like clear all that out and then plant the non-native stuffs, or is it just one of those battles that would be you'd have to watch it day and night?
Oh, do I have a workshop for you? It's my boss, Joey. I think he's gonna talk in 2 weeks, right? But so we kind of break down, it's a lot like COVID. I see COVID as this, right? If you can attack something early, if we can attack COVID early and agree to all wear masks and to socially distance, we have a really good chance of it not spreading, right? And with COVID, I don't think we understood how aggressive it was, but we can learn from the past. So with native plants, what Joey and his team is doing is we forgot about mustard and pennisetum, some of these grasses. They're lost causes, right? There's no way to treat for those unless they go into new areas where they have never been in, and we can start to treat those areas. Right now, we're looking for new weeds, right? There's always new weeds coming in. If we can identify those new weeds, and that's a lot of what Mark does too. If you can go to spots and you know that this is what you have here, and you go in every year and you say, oh, there's a new plant right here, and you can attack those small infestations, right? Just like COVID, we know that 2 people in the community have it, we can isolate them, and then it doesn't spread, right? So that's what we're trying to do with weeds, is identify the new ones and try to treat those, or identify the old ones that are spreading to new areas and try to treat those. And there's some, you're right, there's some that are just lost. They're just, forget it, they're lost causes. The best thing we can, on some of those, the best thing to happen, unfortunately, because it's so damaging, is the fires, right? And it clears some of those out, and then we can come in and try to plant on top of those once it's clear. But yeah, that's a good question. So I think Joey's going to talk on that in a few weeks. And they do a really good job of identifying and spot spraying and trying to get rid of some of this new stuff.
Thanks.
You're on mute, Tori. Sorry. But Antonio, thank you again.
Yeah.
Cool. All right,
All
guys.
right, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks.
Antonio, thank you again.
Thank
Of
you.
course, you guys are welcome.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks very much.